Guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. I hope you guys are having a great day. I certainly am, and that's because I wake up, I get to talk to you guys about Star Wars. That's my job. It's the coolest feeling ever. Thank you guys so much for that. I should say it more. Also, we got 1,000 subscribers since that last video as well. We're now only 9 away from 1 million, which is so cool. But I'm actually going to pick up a thread that I accidentally dropped in the last video, and we are going to talk about Force lightning. So, yesterday I addressed what I consider to be a pretty widespread misconception, which is that Count Dooku was somehow more noble or good than other Sith Lords. At the end of the video, I talked about how Force lightning was essentially a uniquely Sith action. And admittedly, that's what happens when I just talk about something like I did in yesterday's video without fully scripting it out. I do think I need to walk that back a little bit, but only a little bit, and I do want to challenge some of the comments which disagree, as is your right. So the first point I want to acknowledge is about specificity. For one, I don't think Force lightning is unique to the Sith, but I do think it is a uniquely dark side power. Some of you probably don't see the difference there, but it's sort of the rectangle in the square analogy. All Sith are Darksiders, but not all Darksiders are Sith. The Sith have their own sort of philosophy. You can use the dark side of the Force and not be a Sith Lord. Whether you're a Night Sister, whether you have your own view of the Force, it doesn't matter to me. The Sith do not have dominion on Force lightning, although it is obviously a common power they employ. Also, no, using Force lightning once does not automatically flip you from light side to dark side. Rey was not a Sith Lord in episode 9 when she used Force lightning, albeit accidentally, although I do think she was probably drawing on some dark emotions, and it doesn't really matter. I kind of see that movie as largely nonsense anyway. So as far as that goes, people who pointed out that I was wrong on that point, you are correct. I was overly generalizing and was sort of a throwaway point at the end of a video I didn't think about enough. Definitely on me. However, I think the much larger point in the comments was that you don't actually need to be a Darksider to use Force lightning. The most common examples you guys gave were Plo Koon, Luke Skywalker in the Swarm War, Kyle Katarn in the video games, and you are right in that those are all examples of Jedi using Force lightning. Jaina Solo also does on one occasion, I believe in the Yuuzhan Vong War, although it's a undeniably dark side moment. But while those examples do exist, and while Electric Judgment was basically green Force lightning and apparently okay for Jedi, in my opinion, those depictions are inconsistent with the general lore, and I will argue it was a mistake to ever make Force lightning something other than a purely dark side power. Now, there are many different philosophies when it comes to the Force. This is something we discussed in my podcast, Tapcaf Transmissions, where we recently read the novel Traitor. One of the fundamental questions that the Star Wars Expanded Universe asks is whether a dark side action comes from the intent of the user or whether there's something fundamental within the Force that separates light side versus dark side actions. Will something always be inherently evil or inherently good? Does it come down to intention, or perhaps does it come down to effect? With Force lightning, I'm going to argue that it doesn't really matter, and to me, part of the issue here is that we're so used to the Force as it's portrayed in a video game where you need to destroy as many enemies as you can, where you need to take out 10 stormtroopers to get through an area. And to be clear, those need to exist. I love Star Wars video games. I love the Jedi Knight series, and I'm glad that you can play with Force lightning in those games. But when you do that, you're taking the position of someone who needs to kill 100 enemies to get through a level, which is not really a very Jedi-like thing. We need to go back to Yoda's teachings in The Empire Strikes Back. Luke asks Yoda, is the dark side stronger, and how will you know the difference between the dark side and the light side? Yoda says, you will know when you are calm, at peace, passive. A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. The Jedi treat the Force as an extension of themselves, one which is used to protect not only people, but general principles of goodness. Force lightning is the opposite of that. For one, it's a purely offensive power. It's meant to kill and maim, but it also does so not only without the desire to minimize pain, but the opposite. It's meant as a tool of torture. And I think that's the distinction between even other inherently aggressive acts like throwing your lightsaber. It's something that can be done during battle to dispatch an enemy, but in a minimally harmful way, whereas Force lightning is basically the expulsion of pure anger from one's body. And I know you guys are going to point to the distinction with electric judgment as well, and I mean, fair enough, it is in the lore as like a quasi Jedi power, and for those who don't know, electric judgment is supposed to be sort of good side force lightning, but my position is that good side force lightning can't exist, especially when you look at how it's practically used. For example, in the new Jedi Order series, there are several occasions when Luke and Jason use force lightning or electric judgment because it's got green sparks to straight up kill the Yuuzhan Vong en masse. In the unifying force, Luke hits a Yuuzhan Vong warrior with one who is quickly killed while convulsing and writhing in pain. I don't see how the fact that Luke gains access to the power without reaching to fear or anger, I mean, apparently makes this any less dark. Like, is it outright evil to kill a Yuuzhan Vong? No, it's not, especially in the situation Luke is in. However, as Yoda points out, the dark side is more than that. The Jedi teach a lot of things, but really that point of not being needlessly aggressive, of defending life before all else, is first, and electric judgment runs counter to that. And one of the big things, in my opinion, is that it in no way shows a minimal level of lethality or a minimal level of restraint. And this is a topic that the Star Wars Expanded Universe dealt with in the late Bantam era in books like the Thrawn Duology, or even in the New Jedi Order, early New Jedi Order. But I mean, in the Thrawn Duology especially, Luke comes to a reckoning. He realizes that he's been overusing the Force. And this comes down to little things as well. One thing that Star Wars has correctly pointed out is that even something like manipulating the mind of a weak-minded individual is a path to the dark side. You're going into their brain, you're messing around with it to achieve your own personal goals, and that's not right. Sometimes it needs to happen, but it should really be a matter of last resort, not something done on a whim because the Jedi is feeling lazy. You think about how the Jedi see the Force, like a mystical energy that binds the galaxy together. Electric judgment is the exact opposite. It's just like Force lightning. However it's being used, you're not working with the Force, you're twisting it to your own means and using it to kill something. And again, if we want to compare it with something like a lightsaber throw, it's admittedly a bit of a difficult conversation. Why is killing an opponent with a lightsaber throw acceptable, but choking them with the Force is not? Well, again, it's hard, and I think there is the revelation that the Jedi often are not being the best versions of themselves, and I think that's probably a purposeful choice within the lore, especially when you go to like the Clone Wars, where the Jedi should not have been generals, they should not have been warriors. But I mean, the fact is, electric judgment is probably the most ridiculous example of that. The lack of restraint, the idea that you can somehow use the Force, harness its raw power to kill and perhaps torture another individual, and that won't feed into the raw emotions of hate and fear that the Jedi abhor. Like, I don't see how you can use the Force power, electric judgment, without a basic desire to kill something. That's anti-Jedi. The Jedi seek to preserve life. They seek to resolve conflict. They bear their swords whenever necessary and only in a minimally harmful way. Electric judgment and Force lightning as a whole just goes completely counter to that. So to circle back to my initial argument, no, it's not just the Sith who use Force lightning, but in my opinion, no true Jedi can. I mean, the best Jedi can break down, I think, have a moment where they use something like Force lightning or a Force choke and recover from that, but no true Jedi is pulling a Kyle Katarn and using it against hordes of stormtroopers every battle. The inclusion of electric judgment in the lore was, in my opinion, a mistake, and I think it's a mistake that will mostly stick in Star Wars Legends. Listen, the Sith have cool powers and they can fight lots of people. That's part of the issue with the dark side. It is cool, but you got to avoid that if you want to be a good Jedi. These are, of course, just my opinion. I think some of you will probably have some opposite ones, and hey, I look forward to reading them. Let me know down below.